Kick on those slow jams, everyone. Welcome to the Mormon News Report podcast. This is Mormon News Report number 146, where we are going to have a little fireside chat, if you will, about day one of General Conference. I am Brant. I am in a misty and cold and wet Detroit, Michigan. But as I look out and I see the cloud cover and I see all the changing leaves, it is a beautiful, beautiful fall day. So that is where I'm at. I'm also joined, as per usual, with my old pal, Jenny Noonan-Dye. Jenny, where are you joining us from?
From an arid, sunny Provo, Utah. Quite lovely. Also, too, the same with the leaves.
Mm-hmm. And behind the scenes, working all of our wonderful magic, is the one, the only, John Dye. John, I know that we can't see you, but we can see all the artwork that you're putting up. Thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So a couple of thoughts as we only have a limited amount of time. We're probably going to go about 20, maybe 25 minutes to make sure that we end this broadcast before the morning session for Sunday starts for General Conference. But Jenny and John, I've got to say, even though we didn't get any major announcements that were coming out about church procedural things, big things happening, this really was kind of a newsworthy Saturday morning, wouldn't you say? Or just Saturday in general?
I think so. I mean, should we just get into it? I mean, there was so much to talk about. Some themes that kind of were threaded through everything that we heard. I don't know. What do you think, Brant?
Well, John, if you can you pull up that picture that you showed at the very beginning of what it looked like at this auxiliary theater that they were broadcasting General Conference from? And I think this picture is really important because for me, this set a major tone. And Jenny, I know that you and I have talked a lot about this on our news show about the church's response to the coronavirus pandemic and what's happening in Utah. And I think that what we're seeing here is so powerful because we are seeing the entire First Presidency and the entire quorum of the 12 apostles socially distanced. Well, almost the entire quorum of the 12. We'll get to that in just a minute, but they're all socially distant. They're all wearing masks. And I think that it is such a powerful picture. And I'm imagining a stake president hopefully looking at this and telling his congregants, brothers and sisters, if the First Presidency, a group of individuals who are on average 80 to 85 years old, can be wearing masks and sitting socially distant, then you can do it too, barring some major health condition, which if that's the case, you might not want to be coming to church to begin with. And so I think that the thing that has stood out to me, and we've talked about this in the U.S. government perspective, but it's so important when we're talking about leadership, you have to exemplify and show those behaviors. And I think seeing someone like President Nelson, you could see the way that he sits. He is sitting actively. He's not fidgeting with his mask. He's not having this look on his face like, oh, this, I don't want to do this. Like, it is such a powerful image. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into some of these pictures that we're seeing, or if you got that same, if you had that same impression or perspective.
For sure. In fact, our friend Ross on Twitter, one of the first things I noticed during the morning session yesterday was this tweet that he put out with a close-up picture of President Nelson that looks like he grabbed from his screen. Mm-hmm. But he says, if your 96-year-old prophet can obediently follow health advice and wear a mask, so can you.
And I think that's the key. That's the key right there. And it's some basic leadership principles to show or be an example of what you're trying to ask of your congregants to do. It's basic leadership to say, if I'm asking you to do it, I'm going to do the same thing. So we'll get into a lot of the content for the talks in just a minute. I want to welcome everyone who's watching us on our Facebook live stream. We'd love for you to add any respectful comments that you might have about General Conference, about any of the things that you saw that impressed you a lot, anything that stood out to you. I will admit, I will confess, my children did not allow me to watch much of General Conference between soccer games and a whole bunch of other things. So that being said, the one thing that did stand out to me as I was watching a lot of recaps, as I was trying to read about what had happened, Jenny, there was a lot of social commentary for the Saturday session of General Conference, which was fairly surprising because usually the church they how do I want to phrase it? Sometimes they dance around things. They make allusions to things. They're very subtle about things. But this was pretty spot on in both President Oaks' address and in Elder Quentin Cook's address. Did you get that impression as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard not to. I think we were all approaching this particular weekend of conference. I don't want to say perfect storm, but I mean, we do have a pandemic. We've got not only a pandemic that we're living through, but also it's something that is a medical and health issue that has become politicized. We are, the sun is setting on the campaign season, as it's almost time to vote, and so tensions are high. There's a lot of, if not tensions, and certainly emotions, and all of that is it affects everything. It affects including our spirits, and a lot of people, I think, are hearing voices and messages from all sorts of different places, and it's difficult, especially for those of us, myself included, who have had family members who have contracted COVID. It is frankly insulting to hear people dismiss the virus or the reality of what health officials recommend to do. And
Jenny,
that's hard.
This is extremely personal, because not only has this impacted, not only has your family tested positive, you've had a member of your family test positive for it. You all are experiencing a quarantine right now to make sure that you tested negative, but to make sure that you're not potentially going to have any symptoms in the that are bubbling up. But the reality is, this is very much a part of our world, and it still keeps coming up. I will say this too, when it comes to a lot of the social things that are going on, the other surprising thing to me, usually during presidential election years, the church will offer some neutral statements about it's important for us to take place in the political process. But for this, they were a little more explicit. And I think that part of what was going on there is because, and this is really what some of the talks focused on Saturday, because our world, especially in the United States, but in other places throughout the world, are becoming so polarized, it is so difficult for us to find common ground with anybody. And what I heard, and I'm not sure if, and this is me listening to this all after the talks have been given, I know that you were watching it in real time, but what I heard from many of the members of the general authorities, many of the leading men and women, was calls for unity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To me, that was, especially the morning session. It was like, wow, well, what are we dealing with here? And it was exactly that. It was the thread that kind of just wove through the entire session for me, at least in the morning, was unity. Starting off with actually what so far, and we are recording this, like you mentioned before, Sunday morning, before the Sunday morning session. But so far, my favorite part of conference, Brent, has been Elder Kieran's opening prayer.
Really? You really don't hear much about an opening prayer being the thing that really stands out to you. What was it? I mean, listen, not that I've gone through and ranked opening prayers for General Conference before, but what was it that stood out to you that said, wow, this opening prayer is something that I'm going to remember for a while?
So actually, I have a friend who transcribed it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and shared it, because, it's hard if you're trying to take notes in real time. Sometimes you get a word or two off, or you have the general idea, but the words are not accurate. But he took the time to write it out. But what I really appreciated in it is that he said, "We pray for all those who are unwell in body, mind, or spirit, and for those who grieve. We ask thee to bless any in need who are watching or listening to this conference, particularly those who feel marginalized or lost. We seek thy blessing upon all those who are sick or suffering as a result of the COVID virus, and for those working to defeat it." And then this was my favorite part. "We ask for guidance for leaders of nations and peoples around the world as we yearn for a return to grace, civility, and dignity in public life.
That is interesting, and
So,
it's something that really stands out because I you could tell that it's on his mind.
yeah, and it's on all of our minds, and there's a way to talk about it as actually it was as was it President Nelson who said, I have all my notes here actually, but you know, that we can talk about these things without being contentious, honestly. Yeah, I don't know where there's so much to cover.
Well, can I just offer? So we talked a little bit about some of the polarization that's going on. Watching out for those in the marginalized areas. Talking a little bit about unity. You know that I love to look at word trends within General Conference because I think that, granted, my caveat is this: these word trends are words in a vacuum. I'm doing a search on all the words that have been spoken in General Conference to see how often certain words come up. And it's really interesting if you look at the trend of the word unity. The word unity is actually on a big upswing. So it saw a peak in about the 1950s where it was used 135 times. Now that is within a 10-year period, and it's being used, you know, you've got 2 general conferences per year. In the 2020s, it's only 10 months old, and the word unity has been used 9 times. And based on some of the trends that people who are doing this statistical analysis think, this is a major upswing in the word unity. And I wonder if that's what we're going to be seeing as themes possibly for the 2020s as our world becomes more polarized, as people begin to fight more and more with each other. If we're going to hear more calls for unity. When I looked at that, that shocked me. And granted, it's only 9 times. If you're comparing 9 times to 139, 135 times, it doesn't seem that much until you remind yourself 9 times in the span of 10 months. If that trend continues, we are going to be hearing that word a lot. And I don't know about you, Jenny, but I think that is a theme that we all need to hear. It needs to be reinforced over and over and over again.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, and I was wondering how many people were listening and thought, oh, you know what, that's an idea for maybe our, you know, a family theme or a personal theme coming up in the next year or whenever.
And so while we're kind of talking about some things that stood out, this is going to be kind of a smorgasbord. We're going to be picking from here and there. For any of you who are watching us on Facebook, any comments that you might have, we'd love to hear them. We'd love to hear what stood out to you. Just really quickly, this is from Brenda. Brenda said, my mom lost 3 friends in 1 week due to the virus. It's well past time to stop caring about ourselves and to care more about others by following the counsel and example of the prophets and the apostles. It's the right thing to do. As President Kimball and later Nike said, just do it. Susan says some of the things that stood out to her: make sure you have an updated temple recommend, love begets love, exemplify your calling. And Jenny, all those things are things that stand out. Another thing that stood out to me as well, I know that we talked in the spring that discussion of what was currently going on in the world with regards to coronavirus didn't seem to be talked about that much. And I don't know about you, but I heard reference to the pandemic and everything that's going on with this virus that's going throughout the world. That was another common theme that I seemed to hear a lot from. And I think it was welcome to say, yes, this is a part of our world. And we are all looking at how we're going to manage and live through this. As a matter of fact, one of the quotes that I really liked from President Nelson, let me find it here. He said, unusual times can bring unusual rewards. Amid social distancing, face masks, and Zoom meetings, we have learned to do some things differently and some even more effectively. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that's always stood out to me is sometimes we can feel constrained by things. We're put in a box and we feel constrained. I can't do what I usually do, but sometimes those constraints that are put on you can actually cause you to be more creative. And I'm glad that President Nelson pointed out there are some people out there who have done a great job of making the best of a not ideal situation.
Well, and right before, just preceding that comment that he said that's been quoted, I've seen a lot about that unusual times can bring unusual rewards. One of the first things he said in his opening remarks, Brant, was that General Conference in April, 6 months ago, was the most viewed General Conference ever, like by the most people. And I can see why. I mean, at that point, you know, we had been The pandemic was new. The shutdown was relatively new as well. We didn't really know what was happening, not like we do now either. But I think, like you said, it's nice to see that not just acknowledged, but kind of we all lived it in practice, which is, we don't know what's going on. Let's turn to hear what we ought to do, and let's tune in. And I'm glad that he acknowledged that.
And I think what it also does is he recognizes that not only this is what we are all living with right now, we're all having to figure out how to do this. But I would also assume that, considering the age of our leadership of the church, they're probably in a similar situation. They are at that prime age where this can really affect them. And with him having a medical degree, I'm sure that he's saying, we've got to continue. We've got to keep the ball rolling. We've got to keep the train on the track, if you will. So how are we going to do this? And I love that level of creativity.
Yeah, they are all just surely by their age, they are at higher risk, and we don't know what other things might contribute to that. But yeah, it was nice to hear about what's going on in the world without divisiveness.
So let me ask you a couple of questions because I want to spend, before we get into some of the other things that happened during Saturday, I want to spend some time reading a few quotes from Elder Cook's talk and President Oaks's talk. Sure. But I wanted to toss it over to you, Jenny and John. Were there any, outside of those two talks, were there anything that stood out in the Saturday morning session that really struck you?
Oh, yes. I have to, again, I have so many notes. And do we have time? I don't want to.
We are going to be pushed right up against the Sunday morning session. So we'll go until we get kicked off. How's that?
Okay. So one thing that after President Nelson gave his opening remarks, the first talk was given by Elder Bednar, and he talks about, he said, I pray that we as individuals and families are learning the valuable lessons that only challenging experiences can teach us. He talked about, in his manner, as he does, he talked about 2 steps to help with to have our testimony strengthened. He talked about preparation, and then also pressing forward with a steadfastness in Christ. When he talked about preparation, Brant, he said, and again, I'm summarizing because we don't have the transcripts we don't have the printed out talks yet, but essentially the message I got was, listen, I've heard a lot lately about how we don't really have to focus on things like food storage or 72-hour kits, because the brethren have not been talking about it lately. In the past decade or so, you haven't heard a ton about it. And basically he said, listen, repeated admonitions to prepare have been repeated for decades. Mm-hmm. And he also, he talked about his own experience that he and his wife decided to go through their own food storage and got rid of what he called hazardous materials, things that had expired long ago. But I thought that was really notable that he specified, he took the time to single that out about what, of course he talked about spiritual preparedness, but just the physical preparedness. And when he was talking about pressing forward with the steadfastness in Christ, he talked specifically about the heartache of the unexpected separation from a beloved child, when he was referencing a conversation that he had with someone who had lost a child. And of course, I don't hide the fact that this time of year is unique for our family, in that 20 years ago yesterday, my son was stillborn, and so we went to the cemetery to visit his grave. And but anytime, I'm grateful anytime this issue of families who are separated by death is brought up in general conference. But something that Elder Bednar said that really stood out to me in talking about that experience that he had was this quote. He said that what his, I think it was a friend. Sorry, it's so hard when we don't have, the actual talk right in front of us. But he said the quote was, "Our family is all in. We are all in." And I thought that was something that was maybe unexpectedly emotional from Elder Bednar. He doesn't usually, well,
He's very stoic. He's
he's
not one
not.
that,
Yeah, he's not the one who's known for pulling at the heartstrings. I'll just say, I'm not devaluing any of his messages, but that really stood out to me. That idea of the family, saying we're all in.
well,
I
yeah.
like
If you compare him to someone like President Eyring, who President Eyring, his emotions are very at the surface,
that.
and we
That's
see, yeah, and we don't see that very much from Elder Bednar. And I think that sometimes when those emotions do peak out a little bit, or emotional statements like that happen, you do see this side where it's like, oh, you are like me. You are not always a very stoic individual. There is something there beneath you.
right, exactly. And then I think we'd be remiss to not also mention Elder Whiting and Sister Craig. But Elder Whiting, he's in the 70. And the quote that Deseret News pulled was exactly what I thought was a perfect summary. The commandment to be like him is not intended to make you feel guilty, unworthy, or unloved. And this is the part I wrote down. You are good enough. You are loved, but that does not mean you are yet complete. There is work to be done in this life and the next. Only with his divine help can we all progress toward becoming like him. And we've talked quite a lot about this lately, especially as we've been doing Come Follow Me lessons, as we study the Savior's teachings in 3rd Nephi, as we talk about becoming perfect and what that means. I love this, that he talks about our inherent value, our inherent worth. It's there, and we are loved. That it's the love that we receive is not something that we need to earn. It's inherent. But it doesn't mean that there isn't work to be done. And I really like that attitude a lot.
Yeah, this whole idea that there is not a completed state while we are in this mortal life. It is a journey that we will all be on. And he even says there is work to be done in this life and the next. And so this idea of progress, this idea of getting to a point where you've done everything and there's nothing else to do. I like that because it's this idea of continual improvements. There's always something that we could do better. And so that should be a challenge that we all look for. But at the same time, that should be something that gives us hope to say, oh, I can always be better. Oh, I can always be making one step after another. It doesn't matter if it's a millimeter or if it's a mile. There's always room for me to walk and progress forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's always work to be done.
Very quickly with President Michelle Craig, one thing that she said that I liked as well. She said Jesus Christ sees people deeply. He sees individuals, their needs, and who they can become. And I really like this. When others saw fishermen, sinners, or publicans, Jesus saw disciples. When others saw a man possessed by devils, Jesus looked past the outward distress, acknowledged him, and healed him. And I think that this goes back to this theme of all this, some of the awfulness that's happening in the world right now, some of the divisions that are happening, because I wonder if people are wanting to look at other people with a label instead of seeing them like they are. And I think that that's such a powerful reminder for all of us to have, that we need to, I don't know, stop labeling people, stop looking at people as one thing or another. And I will admit, this is something that I need to do better in my life. I'm not very good at this, especially with how divisive some things can be. Man, I need to take a step back and say, okay, I really need to be thinking of these people like individuals and not one of them or whatever label is out there.
Yeah, Brent, my favorite two talks from yesterday, right here, Sister Craig and Sister Eubank.
Yes. Oh, and we will talk about her in just a few minutes. But isn't it amazing, John, when you allow women the chance to not just speak, but when women are given the opportunity to preach? There's some amazing messages that come out there. Wouldn't it be great if we could hear more from some of the women and some of these?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, quick time check. About 8 minutes left.
8 minutes.
8 minutes until the bell rings. Do we want to stop here? I don't want to rush through. Should we? This is live radio, everyone.
Let's do this. Let's talk about Elder Cook's talk, and then we'll put it, because we're going to need some time to get into President Oak's talk. So let's talk about Elder Cook's talk here really quickly.
Yes.
Jenny, I'll read a couple of quotes, and then I'll throw it over to you for any thoughts. Elder Cook said, as leaders, we are not under the illusion that in the past all relationships were perfect, all conduct was Christ-like, or all decisions were just. However, our faith teaches that we are all children of our Father in heaven, and we worship him and his Son, Jesus Christ, who is our Savior. Our desire is that our hearts and minds will be knit in righteousness and unity, and we will be one with them. This is a moment of particularly strong divisions. However, the millions who have accepted the gospel of Jesus Christ have committed themselves to achieving both righteousness and unity. We are all aware that we can do better, and that is our challenge in this day. We can be a force to lift and bless society as a whole. The clarion call to church members is to strive to be a Zion people who are of one heart and one mind and dwell in righteousness. Christ's ministry and message have consistently declared all races and colors are children of God. The culture of the gospel of Jesus Christ is not determined by the color of one's skin or where one lives. While we rejoice in distinctive cultures, we should leave behind aspects of those cultures that conflict with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So Jenny, because I know that you were listening to this live, what were your thoughts during Elder Cook's talk?
Well, I really look forward to getting the transcript soon because he talks specifically and compares now to 4th Nephi, which of course we will be approaching soon, and Come Follow Me. So I think that will be a great resource to have. I really like two specific things that he said. One was, he said, to be better is our challenge, to lift and bless society. And also he talked quite a bit about how unity, and when we come back to record again, President Oakes refers to this as well. But he talks about how unity and diversity are not opposites. We in this church and in society, just in humanity, we have diversity. Diversity is not the opposite of unity. We can have unity with our diversity. I like that a lot.
And I think that's important to remember as we are in a very delicate time right now when it comes to a lot of these divisions. And I wonder if some people view the diversity as a bad thing. But as we've talked about a lot on our news show, having that diversity of opinions helps, because when it's all the same people in the room with many of the same perspectives, sometimes you fail to see. You almost have a blindness as to what could be perceived differently by people, what would be more effective to people. So having that diversity of viewpoints, whether it be with your background, with your upbringing, I would even say with your spiritual perspective, can be really good and important. And that can be unifying. The unifying moment where you could realize, oh, this is how we're all knit together, can be really beneficial. It's the divisions, and I would say the divisions that all sides put together, that can be the most dangerous, because those divisions can be harmful. And so I don't view, as we talked about with Sister Craig's talk, with all those different groups of people out there, you could say that there were labels on each: fishermen, sinners, publicans, but Christ viewed them as disciples. And in a sense, Elder Cook is kind of saying the same thing. We should all be disciples, bringing in our different experiences.
Yes, exactly. And that's to be celebrated, frankly.
That is. So folks, thank you very much for this very brief post-game show for Saturday. If you want to hear our thoughts on President Oak's talk, which is probably going to take a while as we get through a lot of what he said, some of the other amazing talks that happened on Saturday afternoon, I will say, as a former young men's leader, I loved President Stephen Lund's talk when he talked about the boy who was passing the sacrament. I will also say that Elder Gong's talk was great. There's some news about Elder Gong, plus the women's session with, as John mentioned, President Sharon Eubanks' talk was amazing. She is one of the people that I will drop everything and listen to whenever I hear her. If you'd like to hear more of our commentary on that, make sure you subscribe to the Mormon News Report podcast. Jenny and I will be recording tonight after the Sunday sessions to talk about all the news that happened on Sunday, plus our thoughts on the Saturday session. So Jenny, thank you very much for joining us. Are you going to be live tweeting any of conference?
I probably will. My handle is @formerlyfred, which is FORMERLYPHREAD.
Children permitting, that's a big caveat. Children permitting, I will be trying to live tweet conference as well. You can follow me at The Mormon News on Twitter. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, John, because I know that this was a spur of the moment. Hey, let's throw some stuff together. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and enjoy Sunday morning's conference.